He stood at the edge of a silent galaxy, though not in a literal sense. The Emperor of mankind, father of the 20 genetically crafted sons known as the Prime Arcs, had long since become enthroned in perpetuity. Through countless centuries, many saw his visage and thought he was merely a distant memory of a golden age that had never truly come to pass. The Imperium persisted in the slow grind of time, locked in eternal warfare against every threat that lurked in the darkness. Humanity was spread across the vastness of the stars, yet it never truly knew peace. In this twisting labyrinth of cosmic events, one particular menace lay dormant beneath the crust of countless tomb worlds. They were known in certain forbidden archives, coded in esoteric scripts of the Ordo Xenos, as the Necrons. In countless timelines, these ancient machines rose to reassert dominion over the galaxy, heirs to a lineage older than the stars themselves. But in this splinter of fate, the Necrons remained asleep, sealed in the depths of their stasis vaults, untroubled by the shifting currents of alien empires and the stubborn war cries of a million human worlds. Many believed that they would stir eventually, for their entire race was known to be dormant rather than extinct. But time stretched long, and all the while, their endless sleep continued. Thus, the galaxy turned beneath the watchful eyes of gods and monsters who never fully realized how close they were to an ancient doom. In the early days of the Great Crusade, the Emperor himself had received faint echoes of an ancient threat, gleaned from a half-shattered piece of Xenos technology discovered on a world scorched by warp storms. He tested the cryptic device, harnessed the knowledge within, and glimpsed mention of silent mechanical legions. But no tangible trace of them was found, despite the Emperor's attempts to glean some cosmic vantage. Indomitable in his will but pressed ever forward by the demands of unifying humanity, he set aside that ephemeral worry. It would become just another cautionary tale archived in the labyrinthine vaults of Terra, overshadowed by the immediate concerns of the Great Crusade and the unstoppable unfolding of the Horus Heresy. When the Prime Arcs had been scattered across the stars by the machinations of chaos, the Emperor searched for them tirelessly. The Great Crusade blossomed. Planet after planet was brought into compliance, and each Prime Arc reunited with his father, forging the legions Astartes into unstoppable forces that waged war upon the galaxy's many foes. The stories of that era told of mighty battles against the Eldar, the Orcs, and a myriad of lesser Xenos threats. Conquering new star systems, building the framework of the Imperium, and forging alliances or subjugations as required, the Emperor's grand endeavor spanned centuries. For a time, it appeared that the Imperium might achieve its lofty dream of unity and enlightenment. During these days, the Eldar, an ancient and prideful race, occasionally spoke of shadowy tombs belonging to an even older people, remnants of an age of strife older than all living memory. But the Eldar themselves were secretive and racked by their own internal travails. Many craft worlds survived by cautious isolation, only tangentially crossing paths with Imperial fleets. Their warnings, if ever shared, were seldom heeded. And so no heed was given to the notion of these ancient tombs. They were rumored to be caked in dust or buried beneath eons of planetary strata, drifting through the cosmos as inert memorials to times beyond comprehension. A few curious inquisitors had once tried to glean knowledge from the Eldar on the matter, but the Eldar quickly changed the subject or provided riddles that stymied any meaningful insight. The seeds of that threat lay hidden, left to the quiet hush of lost ages. So the Great Crusade continued, unimpeded by any mechanical legions emerging from slumber. It was a triumphant era, marred only by the Emperor's own ambitions to harness humanity's latent psychic potential and to quell the powers of the warp. The Prime Arcs vied with each other for glory and acknowledgement. The resentments that would ultimately spark the greatest civil war in human history simmered beneath a veneer of camaraderie. The seeds of betrayal were planted in the hearts of certain Prime Arcs before they even knew the full measure of their father's design. Chaos was not to be denied. It spread its subtle corruption across the legions, sowing distrust and envy. In another timeline, on countless worlds, the hidden Necrons began to stir amidst this cosmic turbulence, an unpredictable factor in the galactic drama. But in this reality, they did not. Their tombs, though present in the path of expanding legions, remained untriggered, hidden behind advanced stasis fields, cloaked by wards older than modern technology could decipher. No living soul could guess the significance of these sealed tombs. They were so deeply buried that mere happenstance never brought them to the surface. In time, the Great Crusade reached its fateful crescendo, culminating in the declaration of Horus as War Master. Horus, beloved son, the greatest general among the Primarchs, took upon his shoulders the duty of commanding the Emperor's armies while the Emperor worked on secret projects back on Terra, forging the foundations of what he believed would be the future of mankind, unfettered by the warp. But Horus's heart was a battleground. Spurred by envy, manipulated by the ruinous powers, he eventually gave in to the lies that the Emperor sought godhood and was betraying the ideals they once shared. A malignant seed of rebellion took shape, and so, a small portion of the legions changed their loyalties in secret, forming dark pacts with chaos. The Horus heresy, at its earliest stage, was a quiet conspiracy bound to erupt into a full-scale galactic civil war. When the heresy was finally unleashed, it scarred entire regions of space. Worlds upon worlds burned. Brother fought brother as legions Astartes marched against each other. Horus had cunningly orchestrated a series of crippling ambushes, forging alliances with other Primarchs who, for various personal reasons, chose to follow him into revolt. The Imperium was gripped in shock and disbelief. The betrayal of the War Master, the mightiest among them, cut deep into the soul of humanity. Faith faltered, and chaos rejoiced in the slaughter. Even so, no trace of the ancient mechanical menace stirred from slumber, and that ironically provided a grim measure of relief to the Imperium. At least they were not beset on yet another front by some silent legion. The threat they faced was dire enough without adding a new dimension to the conflict. The final confrontation at Terra shattered the old certainties. Titans battled across the battered plains of the Imperial Palace. Legions of traitor Marines marched under the ruinous banners of the Dark Gods. The Emperor, in a last desperate gambit, confronted Horus aboard the War Master's battle barge. There, the fate of humanity teetered on the edge of annihilation. In a moment of cataclysmic struggle, the Emperor slew Horus but sustained mortal wounds in doing so. His broken body was placed upon the Golden Throne, kept alive by precarious warp-tech mechanisms, effectively chaining his soul in unending vigilance. This victory, if it could be called that, saved the Imperium, but at a great cost. For 10,000 years, the Emperor's body would remain enthroned, guiding and protecting humanity only through the intangible might of his psychic presence. The heresy had ended, but the scars it left would never fully heal. A new age began, one of unremitting warfare, dogmatic faith, and deeply ingrained mistrust. Millennia passed under the watchful grimness of the Inquisition and the newly established ecclesiarchy, which proclaimed the Emperor as a god. Space Marine chapters reorganized, splitting from the old Legion structure to ensure that no single commander might ever wield the power Horus once did. The Imperium solidified, forging new crusades to reclaim or reconquer worlds lost during the heresy. The warp storms churned, and the Eye of Terror continued to boil forth an unending stream of chaos threats. Orcs rampaged across the galaxy in their typical warlike migrations. The Eldar, ever proud and fading, fought for their survival, engaging in ephemeral alliances with humanity on rare occasions. Meanwhile, on thousands of worlds, sealed tombs of the Necrons waited, silent as the void, never triggered, never awakened, hidden in the shadows of time. In the 30th millennium, the seeds of a new destiny were sown. As the Imperium expanded further from its core, it encountered pockets of rising Xenos powers, some ephemeral, some cunning. Among them were the Tau, a youthful but rapidly advancing species. Yet compared to the ancient threat of the Necrons, the Tau were newborns. Against the cosmic tapestry of the galaxy's eons, they were as fleeting sparks. But they mattered to the Imperium, for they offered a new front in the endless war, a front where technology and ideology clashed. The Tau preached the greater good, forging alliances with various alien species. Their empire began to expand at the fringes of Imperial territory, leading to scattered conflicts with the Adeptus Astartes and the Imperial Guard. At the same time, The Tyranids arrived from extragalactic space, devouring entire star systems in their insatiable hunger. Hive fleets such as Behemoth and Kraken tested the Imperium's resilience like never before, forcing entire chapters of Space Marines to sacrifice themselves to preserve vital worlds. In countless battles, the Imperium threw everything it had at these monstrous swarms. The Tyranids, perhaps the largest existential threat to life in the galaxy, found one advantage that was invisible to any mortal perspective. On many tomb worlds, where in other timelines the slumbering Necrons might have stirred to defend themselves or to reassert cosmic dominance, there was only silence. Some tomb worlds were consumed by the Tyranids, their stasis vaults never disturbed or discovered, their occupant legions effectively bypassed, still locked in mechanical hibernation. In these instances, the Tyranids' hive mind scarcely registered a faint echo of metal structures far underground. It found no impetus to break them open. Eons of cosmic cunning told the swarm to move on to more fertile feeding grounds. And so these potential cataclysms lay forgotten. The Tyranids consumed the upper crust of planets, draining biomass, but in many cases never stirring the sleeping horrors that lay inert under cryptic wards. Still, in every corner of the galaxy, legends persisted. Eldar farcers of great age sometimes scoured the skeins of fate, noticing that something was absent, a quietness where they had once expected a catastrophic rise. Some believed the hidden threat was sealed by the Emperor's psychic might. Others postulated the Eldar gods had interfered. Many simply dismissed it as a stroke of cosmic luck. Among the orcs, battered though they were by constant warfare, a few war bosses occasionally stumbled upon cryptic tomb entrances. The megalomaniacal orc sense of curiosity led them to tinker with half-buried technology. But for reasons unknown, the tombs did not stir to defend themselves. Some of these orcs ended up inadvertently sealing the tombs further with rubble from over-enthusiastic demolitions. Others simply got bored with the shiny gubbins that would not open. The Necrons remained suspended in their dreamless half-life. Within the Imperium, knowledge of the Necrons was minimal, gleaned only from the rarest of Xenos texts or from the scarcest references in ancient explorator logs. The Ordo Xenos had compiled scattered fragments, but the overall conclusion was that if these Necrons existed at all, their threat must have been overstated or consigned to a bygone era. With no living witness to confirm the full nature of their existence, the Imperium's entire stance was one of mild suspicion, overshadowed by more immediate and active threats. The chroniclers of the Adeptus Mechanicus sometimes re-examined fragments found on a few remote worlds, analyzing the bizarre inert metal for a clue to advanced technology. Their conclusions remained inconclusive. Surviving scraps of necrodermis never stirred nor regenerated, as they once had in other timelines. Perhaps the sleeping minds that powered them were too deeply entombed, or some improbable cosmic event severed the link they would otherwise maintain. In any case, the Mechanicus, though intrigued, did not see fit to raise alarms about a threat that never emerged. They had more pressing matters, from constant orc raids to the demands of churning out war material for the Imperium's countless battlefronts. As the 41st millennium dawned, the Imperium found itself in the throes of numerous calamities at once. The Eye of Terror spat forth Abaddon the Despoiler, a chosen champion of chaos, who waged repeated black crusades against the Cadian Gate. Entire chapters of Space Marines, regiments of the Astra Militarum, and the formidable might of the Adeptus Sororitas rallied to defend the crucial stronghold. Across the galaxy, the Tyranids launched further hive fleets. Orc Warafs gathered. The Tau Empire innovated new technologies and pressed their expansions into Imperial space. Amid this maelstrom, no mechanical legion emerged from hidden crypts. For better or worse, the Imperium did not have to contend with the terrible might of awakened Necrons. That portion of cosmic cataclysm never came to pass. But fate, as it often does, has a cruel sense of irony. On a backwater world in the Segmentum Ultima, a minor conflict played out between a tendril of Hive Fleet Leviathan and the local PDF forces, supported by an understrength Space Marine chapter. In the midst of the planet's deserts, swirling dust storms revealed a half-buried structure of black stone. Explorators noted it but, pressed by the Tyranid onslaught, dismissed it as a minor Xenos ruin of unknown origin. The world was on the brink of being overrun. The Adeptus Astartes decided to make a final stand in the planet's capital, unwilling or unable to spare resources for an archaeological expedition. And so the structure stood, battered by drifting sands, quietly humming with a power that had been carefully locked away millions of years before. If things had gone slightly differently, if the planet had not been doomed to Tyranid invasion, perhaps the Imperium might have uncovered a clue. Instead, the Tyranids swallowed the desert, devoured the capital, and eventually moved on, leaving a barren rock behind, devoid of life. But beneath the planet's crust, deep in the tomb vaults, the silent legions never stirred, never fought back. The ancient failsafe that might have triggered an awakening in the presence of intruders had malfunctioned over the eons. Internal power sources, though theoretically infinite, required certain cosmic signals from their masters' long-lost fortresses. Those signals never arrived. Other places in the galaxy saw different developments. In the halo stars, certain Eldar corsairs roamed lightly across the edges of reality, drifting from one hidden webway gate to another. They encountered bizarre phenomena that they suspected were remnants of Necron activity from a prehistoric war known as the War in Heaven. That war, in Eldar mythology, was cataclysmic, fought between the Old Ones and the Tan, with the Necronter transforming themselves into cold metal husks. The Eldar had expected that eventually the machines would stir once more, continuing the ancient cycle of genocide. But millennia passed, and still the galaxy's tomb worlds slept. Some Eldar believed the cycle had been irrevocably broken, or that the last vestiges of the Tan had somehow devoured themselves in a hidden cosmic cataclysm. The Farseers, ever vigilant, remained uncertain. They found no conclusive answer in the shifting patterns of the future. All that was certain was that there was a quiet place in the tapestry of fate, a blank spot where logic dictated there ought to be war. On the grand scale, the Imperium's war machine continued to churn. Countless souls were sacrificed daily on nameless fronts across the galaxy. The High Lords of Terra guided the Imperium through crisis after crisis, each new war overshadowed by the next. The standoff with Abaddon raged on. The Tyranids advanced. The Tau pressed their expansions. The Eldar hovered on the edges, sometimes assisting humanity in the face of chaos or the Tyranids, but never truly allying with them. And through it all, the Imperium's interest in the Necron question faded further into obscurity. If the mechanical legions existed, they had seemingly chosen to remain absent. The concerns of the everyday overshadowed the hypothetical. As centuries of strife churned the galaxy into a cauldron of bloodshed, those lonely tombs remained silent, sealed by an improbable glitch or perhaps a deeper plan not yet ready to unfold. Even so, stories still circulated on certain worlds that claimed an inconceivable longevity of civilization. There was a rumor about a desert planet in the galactic southwest where travelers saw phalanxes of metal skeletons standing motionless under the scorching sun. But those travelers were criminals, exiled from a hive city, who told tall tales of living metal. Their stories changed every time they told them, soon dismissed as mere ravings. Meanwhile, an Ordo Xenos agent combed the rumor mills, recorded these accounts in his private logs, then died in an orc raid on a nearby system before he could fully investigate. Another rumor told of a certain tomb world in the eastern fringe that had begun to unseal ever so slightly. A whisper drifted among the Eldar that a single Canoptech unit, a mechanical guardian of the Necron tomb, had emerged to make repairs and then retreated underground. Not even the Eldar could confirm it with absolute certainty. They simply watched from a distance as the warp signatures in that region remained eerily calm. If there was an awakening, it was incomplete, some half-measured stirring that never blossomed into a full-scale mobilization. The galaxy remained in ignorance. For better or worse, the mechanical armies that could have overshadowed even the Imperium's might seemed lost to the sands of time. One among the prime arcs, still alive in the warp-twisted reality of the 41st millennium, was Magnus the Red, forever changed by his heresy. His presence in the Great Eye was a testament to the inescapable lure of chaos. He, like others, had gleaned fragments of hidden knowledge from the warp, enigmatic references to beings older than the Old Ones themselves. He had wondered more than once why these Necrons, never arose to challenge the Imperium in force. He sensed the potential for catastrophic conflict buried beneath the surface of real space. Yet even with all his sorcerous might, he could not wake them or locate them precisely. Their tombs were too well hidden, warded by something unconnected to the warp. Over the centuries, he tried to glean glimpses of such ancient places in his crystal scryings, but all he saw were dusty catacombs and the dim flicker of inert energies. So he turned back to the more immediate amusements of Tsench's domain, letting the riddle remain unsolved. Mortarion, prime ark of the Death Guard, entrenched in the pestilential swamps of the warp, had no interest in such mysteries. His legion was consumed by the worship of Nurgle, and his primary focus lay upon unleashing plagues upon the Imperium. In the case of the Necrons, there was no living flesh to infect, no mortal despair to exploit, so Mortarion's interest, if ever present, was fleeting. Likewise, Fulgrim and the Emperor's children cared little. Their depraved pursuit of sensation had no use for lifeless metal husks. If the Necrons were dormant, it did not concern them. Ongron, lost to a feral rage under Khorne's thrall, similarly found no glory in challenging an unresponsive foe that did not bleed or feel fear. And so the traitor legions continued their wars against the Imperium, oblivious or indifferent to the lost threat that lay hidden in the darkness between stars. On Terra, the Emperor, half-conscious in the warp and anchored to the Golden Throne, perceived a myriad swirling visions. The Imperium's countless pleas for deliverance reached him in psychic echoes. He saw the horrors wrought by chaos, the unstoppable hunger of the Tyranids, the unstoppable cunning of orc warlords, the creeping expansions of the Tau. And in the distance there was nothing, a curious blankness, a quiet that should not have been so quiet. Even in his transcendent awareness, the Emperor could not fully decipher the cause. He recalled glimpses from the device he had once studied so many millennia ago, a device that whispered of the silent empire that was to come. But the device was long gone, and the threat it warned of never materialized. Shackled as he was, the Emperor had neither the means nor the immediate desire to probe deeper. He needed every ounce of his psychic might to keep the Astronomicon lit, guiding the Imperium's ships through the warp. He needed to shield the species from the ravenous entities that lurked in the Immaterium. The ancient mechanical threat was an enigma, but no longer an active one. And so it was that the Emperor, for all his might, did nothing to stir that sleeping doom. If it was content to slumber, then let sleeping horrors lie. In the final decades of the 41st millennium, the Imperium's precarious balance teetered. Waves of conflict battered the realm of humanity from every side. Black Crusade after Black Crusade hammered the Cadian Gate. The Tyranid hive fleets, from Leviathan to Kronos, devoured entire star systems. Orc empires under war bosses of unprecedented scale threatened to carve up swathes of the galaxy. The Tau made daring expansions, forging ephemeral alliances with rebellious imperial worlds. Meanwhile, the Eldar pressed their labyrinthine agendas, sometimes striking at chaos, sometimes ignoring the Imperium's plight entirely. The one solace was that the Necrons, that ancient sleeping race with the power to extinguish entire suns, did not rise up to add to the Imperium's woes. It was almost too good to be true, and perhaps it was. On a distant tomb world, far from the main arteries of Imperial navigation, a single beep echoed in the darkness. For the first time in 60 million years, a sensor array flickered to life. Intricate glyphs scrolled across a half-buried console. A severed link that had once guided the entire tomb network was re-established for a microsecond, bridging silent vaults. Ghostly shapes of energy flickered across the tomb's interior, and then the console powered down again. This was a planet that had once belonged to a mighty Necron dynasty, caretakers of a silent empire. But the star system's alignment had shifted over eons. Cosmic dust had choked the planetary orbit, and the failsafes that should have triggered a phased awakening were rendered inert by an improbable combination of mechanical error and ancient damage. The beep subsided. Silence returned. But it was not the same silence it had been a moment before. A single spider-like construct stirred in the gloom, responding to that beep. Its directive was to maintain the tomb, ensure the slumbering guardians were fully functional, and to activate them when summoned. Yet the sequence had been aborted by a catastrophic glitch, and so the construct scuttled through the darkness, performing only the most basic of maintenance tasks. It welded shut a crack in a stasis chamber, replaced a faulty circlet inside the cortex of a lich guard, and then powered down again. The tomb still did not awaken. The Legion did not march. For now, the silent machine race still slept. And so time rolled on into the latter half of the 41st millennium. The Imperium was battered, but endured. Worlds were lost and worlds were reclaimed. The Great Rift tore the galaxy in half, a monumental warp storm that cut across real space in the wake of Abaddon's greatest assault. Demons spilled into real space. The Emperor's realm was split into two, with the darkness of the Imperium Nihilus overshadowing entire sectors. Robot Guilliman, Prime Arc of the Ultramarines, returned from stasis with the help of the Eldar, forging a new epoch known as the Imperium Sanctus, introducing new, more advanced space marines called the Primaris. Yet even as Guilliman attempted to restore the Imperium to a measure of stability, every day brought fresh crises. The largest Orc Wyak in centuries raged across the newly sundered galaxy, led by the beastly cunning of Gazkul Thraka. Tendrils of Tyrannid hive fleets pressed inward, unstoppable in their consumption. Chaos legions exploited the Great Rift to launch fresh invasions. And still, the tomb world slept. In the corridors of the Imperial Palace, far beneath the golden spires where pilgrims thronged to worship, a few members of the Imperial Inquisition began to reevaluate old records. Among these was Inquisitor Jeldon Barentez, an Ordo Xenos operative who had dedicated decades of his life to investigating obscure references in ancient texts. Barentez was unusual for an Imperial Inquisitor. He had an unquenchable curiosity and was less xenophobic than many of his colleagues. He wanted to catalog and understand every possible threat that might arise. It was in the dust-laden vaults of the ancient Terran archives that he found mention of the artifact once examined by the Emperor so long ago. Fragmented logs, half-coded in archaic ciphers, hinted at a dire threat from an unknown mechanical race, older than life itself, that had once warred with godlike entities. The accounts were incomplete, missing entire sections, no doubt lost during the Horus Heresy or earlier cataclysms. But what little remained suggested that the Emperor had suspected this race would eventually rise. Yet there was no record of them doing so. Intrigued, Barentez compiled every scrap of data he could find. Over the years, he built a thick dossier that remained largely speculative. Each rumor or myth was unverified, each potential sighting contradicted by other reports. Some indicated these machines might be unstoppable, able to vanish from real space at will. Others implied they might have planet-killing weapons or be able to harness the power of black holes. None of it was confirmed. Inquisitor Barentez found himself at a crossroads. The Imperium was on the brink of countless existential threats. Was it worth devoting resources to a ghost story? Another typical Inquisitor would have turned away, but Barentez persisted. He began to suspect that the Emperor himself had taken pains to keep the memory of these sleeping monsters suppressed, perhaps to avoid panic or to steer the Imperium's energies elsewhere. But Barentez believed that knowledge was power, and that if one day the tomb worlds did awaken, the Imperium would be caught unawares, condemning humanity to utter annihilation. Therefore, he quietly reached out to certain tech priests in the Adeptus Mechanicus, contacts he had cultivated over the years, searching for any instance of advanced metallic artifacts or bizarre cosmic anomalies. The results were meager, but a few scattered references pointed to the Eastern Fringe and the Halo stars, to worlds that had been quarantined for unknown reasons. Perhaps, Barentez speculated, that was where the elusive tombs lay. In the midst of his investigations, the galaxy's political climate shifted dramatically. Guilliman's Indomitus Crusade attempted to bring the Emperor's light to the Imperium Nihilus, bridging the warp-scarred gap with fleets of warships. Here, the threat of chaos overshadowed everything else. The galaxy was in chaos, literal and figurative. So Barentez's endeavors remained a minor footnote, overshadowed by the headlines of war. He petitioned for a small, specialized kill team of the Death Watch to accompany him on an explorator mission to one of these rumored tomb worlds. If there was even a shred of truth to be found, Barentez wanted to find it. After months of bureaucratic wrangling, he managed to secure a small Corvette-class vessel, the Shadowed Quest, helmed by a handful of loyal crew drawn from his personal retinue. Alongside him were half a dozen Deathwatch Marines from various chapters, each an elite Xenos hunter specialized in different forms of warfare. It was a testament to the Imperium's vastness that, despite the crippling wars raging across the galaxy, a single inquisitorial mission of modest scale could slip through the cracks without garnering broad attention. The Shadowed Quest charted a route through the swirling storms, heading to a remote system on the eastern fringe. According to his leads, one planet there had been flagged centuries ago by a Mechanicus survey team for unresponsive subterranean architecture. No expedition had followed up because the planet was not deemed strategically valuable. The Orcs had raided the system sporadically, but never established a foothold. Tau expansions skirted the region, never venturing that far. For all official purposes, the planet was worthless. But Barentez was determined to see it with his own eyes. Upon arrival, the Inquisitor's corvette found the system quiet, battered by cosmic debris. One large planet had been overrun by a Tyranid splinter fleet decades earlier, now left barren. Another was ravaged by Orc scrap cities that had long gone silent, possibly due to infighting or starvation. But the third planet, rocky, desert-like, unremarkable, matched Barantes's records for hidden structures. The Shadowed Quest made orbit. Through the observation windows, the retinue glimpsed dusty deserts, jagged mountain ranges, and broken plains of black basalt. No sign of active life. The Corvette scanners found faint energy readings beneath the surface, but at such depth as to make them almost indiscernible. Tucked between layers of metallic or something faint pulsed in the darkness. The crew steeled themselves for a potential first contact with what Barentez suspected could be a Necron tomb. The Deathwatch kill team deployed via drop pod, accompanied by the Inquisitor and a few Servoskull scouts. They landed on the outskirts of an ancient crater, where the scanners indicated the subterranean structure was most dense. In the swirling orange dust, they found black monolithic stones jutting from the desert floor. Symbols that defied classification adorned the surfaces. The Deathwatch Marines maintained a tight perimeter, scanning for movement. All was silent. Barentez approached with caution, shining a luminescent device onto the glyphs. He recognized none of them, but they matched certain patterns described in the oldest Xenos records in the Ordo Xenos vaults. Sinister shapes reminiscent of fractured crystals or spidery lines. Pressing on, the group discovered a half-buried entrance, sealed by what looked like a seamless metal door. No keyhole, no console, no visible mechanism. The Marines tried to melt through it with a carefully regulated melt-a-charge. The door resisted valiantly, but eventually the superheated energies created a slag-like opening large enough for a man to pass through. Beyond lay a tunnel of black metal. The air was stale, undisturbed for uncounted millennia. Step by step, the kill team advanced, guided by the dull glow of lumen beams, moving in standard infiltration formation. Ornate walls framed a corridor that twisted and sloped downward, as if leading into the bowels of the planet. The further they descended, the more tangible the sense of wrongness became. A hush, not merely an absence of sound, but a complete vacuum of presence. Even the psychoreactive spirits of the Astartes, normally so attuned to their environment, felt stifled. Finally, the corridor opened into a vast chamber. Towering pillars of obsidian-like metal lined the walls. In the center rose a dais with a single spindly structure, perhaps a dais for a commanding figure. Yet nothing stirred. No guardians, no lights, no flicker of awakening technology. It was as if the tomb had been abandoned. The Deathwatch spread out, scanning corners, searching for hidden dangers. Barentez carefully approached the dais. There, to his surprise, he saw an indentation shaped like a hand. Without hesitation, he took a servoskull from his side and used its mechanical appendage to test the indentation. First, nothing happened. Then a spark of greenish light flickered. The dais shifted, rotating a few centimeters. A droning hum reverberated through the chamber. The Death Watch quickly formed a defensive circle, bolters raised, ready to respond. But the noise soon faded. No metallic warriors emerged from hidden alcoves. No portals opened. It was simply a mechanical sigh, as if the tomb had recognized some sort of input, but lacked the remaining codes to come fully online. Barentez, heart pounding, examined the dais for more clues. He found an ancient panel with cryptic runes. The logic behind them was indecipherable, but he sensed that these runes implied a system check, a series of readiness protocols. If he had guessed correctly, something was deeply damaged or offline. Perhaps it was a dynasty's primary command node, severed from the rest of its vast network. This tomb, for all its magnitude, was inert. The Inquisitor and the Marines continued to explore, stepping through side corridors, scanning the inert stasis chambers. Row upon row of greenish glass pods filled with metallic skeletons stood quietly. The Xenos forms, vaguely humanoid but with unsettling proportions, remained motionless. If truly awakened, these creatures, Necron warriors as Barentez guessed, would have been a force of unimaginable danger. Yet here they were, lined up like broken dolls. The entire tomb complex was similarly inert. Occasionally, a faint hum indicated that some subsystem was running, but it never amounted to a fully awakened legion. After hours of exploration, the kill team found a deeper level that had partially collapsed. Here, the structure's advanced metal was twisted, forcibly bent by some unimaginable force, possibly tectonic shifts or an ancient orbital bombardment. A labyrinth of catwalks and half-submerged crawlspaces provided glimpses of advanced machinery, spider-like automata lying inert, partially destroyed. Barentez marveled at the technology, though the Adeptus Mechanicus tech adept with him hissed in frustration at his inability to glean any functional knowledge from it. The group documented everything, capturing dozens of picked recordings and data scrapes. Eventually, they withdrew to the Corvette, somewhat mystified but certain of one thing. They had found a genuine Necron tomb, but it was broken. Not merely dormant, but crippled on a fundamental level. That might explain why it had never awakened, nor signaled any of its kin. It was a piece of a cosmic puzzle that was simply stuck. Other missions followed, scattered across the decades. Barentez or like-minded Inquisitors visited rumored tomb sites in other systems, often with similar results. In every single case, the tomb was inert, broken, or sealed in such a way that no normal action could trigger an awakening. Many questioned if the entire Necron race might be collectively crippled by a catastrophic glitch, or if perhaps they were simply biding their time. The galaxy at large, of course, remained unaware of these discoveries. The Imperium was concerned with more pressing threats. Only a select circle of Ordo Xenos Inquisitors, and some high-ranking tech priests, had any sense that the ancient mechanical empire was indeed real, albeit strangely unresponsive. Debates raged in secret halls. Should they attempt to destroy these tombs? Should they scavenge them for technology? Was it even possible to do either at scale? Time and again, the Imperium discovered that the tomb structures were made of exotic self-repairing alloys that defied easy destruction. A single melt-a-bomb left only a charred scar. Orbital bombardments buried some tomb entrances, but the Imperium had no way of knowing if they truly wiped out the deeper catacombs or simply sealed them under mountain ranges of rubble. Meanwhile, direct attempts to harvest technology usually yielded little. In many instances, once a piece was removed from the tomb, it became inert and impossible to analyze, as if the controlling intelligence at the tomb's core needed to be active for the necrodermis to display its properties. But that controlling intelligence did not respond. Despite the frustrations, some modest breakthroughs occurred. Tech priests gleaned new insights into quantum entanglement and living metal. A few improvements to warp-dampening Geller fields were rumored to have come from these scraps of knowledge. But the Imperium was still left with only partial understanding, never able to replicate these wonders in full. Among the Eldar, especially on craft worlds threatened by chaos or tyrannids, the suspicion that the Necrons might remain asleep forever prompted mixed feelings. On the one hand, the Eldar were relieved. They remembered the war in heaven, or at least the mythic shapes of it, and knew that the Necron threat could have dwarfed all others if it had re-emerged at full strength. On the other hand, they worried about the cosmic balance. The webway was riddled with hidden gates to tomb worlds. If, one day, the dormant race somehow overcame its stasis, the Eldar might find themselves unprepared. Even so, none of their farseers could foresee any near-future event that would cause a full awakening. Every time they scried those lines of fate, they found only a sealed fate, locked behind uncountable walls of silence. So the Eldar turned their attentions elsewhere, focusing on staving off Slaanesh's slow consumption of their souls and forging alliances where beneficial. Among the orcs, sporadic encounters with bits of fancy metal gits continued. On rare occasions, a big mech might salvage a chunk of dormant Necron technology and incorporate it into some improbable contraption. Usually it blew up spectacularly, or simply did nothing. The orcs learned nothing of substance. They had bigger fights to pursue anyway, roaring across the galaxy, heedless of the silent tomb worlds they might have inadvertently trampled. Only a handful of war bosses ever came away from such tomb-laden worlds disappointed that they couldn't find a good scrap. For orcs, anything that didn't fight back was boring. Those words were read by a handful of inquisitors, some tech priests, and perhaps a few high-ranking lords. But the Imperium had more pressing battles to fight. The treatise was sealed away. Few heeded Barantes' words, or if they did, they reasoned that any hypothetical threat from a truly dormant race was secondary to the daily cataclysms the Imperium already faced. Over the next decades, Barantes passed away during a purge of a genestealer cult, and his treatise gathered dust in an archive on Terra. Meanwhile, far from the heart of Imperial power, on an unnamed tomb world locked in an endless winter, a malfunction was gradually repaired by a silent network of scuttling scarab constructs. The tomb's overlord, a once powerful Nemzir, continued to dream in stasis. At times, the tomb's systems flickered, forging partial connections to other tomb worlds. The Nemzir's shattered mind drifted through fragmented data streams, gleaning glimpses of cosmic events, the rise of humanity, the fall of Chaos champions, the unstoppable expansions of the orcs and Tyranids. In another timeline, he would have awakened with righteous fury, gathering his legions to reclaim the galaxy. But in this reality, the data remained incomplete, the network glitch unresolved. The tomb's algorithm cycled, searching for the correct astral alignment that never came. So the Nemzir's dream continued, steeped in illusions of a million-year-old war, pitting the Necronter against the old ones. He believed that victory was at hand, that soon the galaxy would kneel. But instead, time moved on without him. Indeed, time marched inexorably forward. By the dawn of the 42nd millennium, as Guilliman's Imperium strove to hold back the tides of destruction, as the Tau advanced their sphere expansions, as the Tyranids and Orcs threatened entire sectors, the tomb worlds remained inert, a hidden power that might never be unleashed. The Imperium's faithful flocked to cathedrals to worship the Emperor, forging unstoppable zeal. The Adeptus Astartes fought battle after battle to preserve the remains of the Imperium. In all of that turmoil, the hypothetical terror of unstoppable, soulless legions was forgotten by the masses. Yet the galaxy is a place of miracles and horrors, shaped by improbable coincidences and overshadowed by ancient destinies. Perhaps in some far future, a random cosmic shift will realign the broken star maps in a single tomb world's logic engine. Perhaps a chaotic warp surge will short-circuit the stasis fields, inadvertently awakening the legions. Or maybe an ambitious tech priest will succeed in reactivating a Necron command node, hoping to harness its power. Should that day come, the Imperium and all other species would face a threat they are unprepared to handle, for the Necrons' might is incalculable. But until that day, they remain silent watchers, inert guardians of a past so ancient that even the Eldar call it legend. So it is that the galaxy endures, battered by war but spared from the final doom that an awakened Necron empire would have surely wrought. In the hearts of men, such secrets remain half-whispered rumors. A colonel in the Astra Militarum might have seen references to metal skeletons in an after-action report, but he dismisses them as battlefield hysteria. A rogue trader might possess a shard of unusual black metal, locked in his private vault, never realizing it was once part of a Necron pylon. An Archon of the Dark Eldar might recall a fleeting rumor of ancient tombs, but sees no profit in visiting them. So the galaxy's players dance their endless dance, blind to the army that does not march. And somewhere, lost in the swirl of cosmic dust, billions upon billions of inert Necron warriors stand in formation, awaiting a call that never comes. Thus, the Imperium faces its many enemies, locked in the unending war that defines the grim darkness of the far future. Chaos will never rest, the Tyranids will never stop hungering, the Orcs will never cease their mania for conflict, and the Tau will forever push outward in the name of the greater good. The Necrons remain the only foe that has yet to make its move. And so the question lingers. Is humanity truly blessed by their silence? Or is the galaxy merely standing on the brink of a cataclysm that will dwarf all others? As centuries pass, that question remains unanswered, overshadowed by the immediate crises that consume the Imperium's existence. In this quiet corner of fate, the ancient legions are still. No one can say if one day, a faint hum of cosmic alignment will echo through the labyrinth of stasis tombs, and the galaxy will awaken to a new nightmare. For now, at least, the Necrons remain dormant. Yet the memory of that possibility endures. Inquisitor Barentez once wrote, "The greatest threat is not the foe we see advancing upon our gates, but the one we know exists, yet never see at all." So it is that the galaxy remains in the illusions of relative security regarding these ancient undead machines. Perhaps the Emperor, in his final illusions of mortality, found some subtle way to keep them at bay, weaving a hidden psychic ward. Perhaps the Tomb World dynasties were irreversibly sabotaged by cosmic fate. Or perhaps they simply bide their time, comprehending the swirl of events in the galaxy through some means unknown, waiting for the moment to strike with the unstoppable precision of living metal. Until that moment, the Imperium's wars of survival grind on, ignorant of the silent watchers beneath the shifting sands of a million worlds. And that is the nature of the grim darkness of this alternate 41st millennium, that even the unstoppable legions of an ancient empire might slumber, while the ceaseless struggles of mortal empires continue above them, never realizing how tenuous their fate truly is.